parents favored my sister and treated me like servant. Now they're watching as another man. Most people grow up believing their parents will always love them, that no matter what happens, family is forever, that parents will always protect, support, and cherish their children. I used to believe that too, until I realized not all children are wanted. Some are just there. An inconvenience, a mistake, an afterthought. And for 27 years, that's exactly what I was. I grew up in a house that never truly felt like home. I had a roof over my head. I had food on my plate. I had parents who, to outsiders, looked normal. But beneath the surface, it was different. Because from the moment I was old enough to understand, I knew I wasn't wanted. It wasn't obvious at first. There were no harsh insults, no physical punishments, no big, dramatic moments like in the movies. No, my parents were smarter than that. Their neglect was calculated. When I asked for something, I was told I was being ungrateful. When I cried, I was told I was being dramatic. When I needed them, they were suddenly too busy. But my sister? She was treated like royalty. She got everything. Every toy she wanted. Every bit of attention she asked for. Every excuse in the world when she made mistakes. And me? I was just there to serve her. As the older sibling, my responsibilities were non-stop. Cooking, cleaning, making sure my sister was taken care of. By the time I was a teenager, I was more of a live-in servant than a son. And the worst part? They made me believe it was normal. The control didn't stop at home. If I wanted to join a club, suddenly, I had too many responsibilities. If I wanted to go out with friends, my parents suddenly felt unwell and needed me at home. If I wanted to apply for college, they refused to sign any paperwork. Every opportunity one had, they found a way to take it from me. And if I ever dared to push back, the manipulation began. They were masters at guilt tripping. They told me I was selfish for wanting more. They told family members I was difficult and ungrateful. I was bombarded with calls from aunts and uncles telling me to be nicer to my parents. It was suffocating. So when I turned 18, I did the only thing I could. I left. It wasn't easy. My parents refused to support me. I had to work multiple jobs just to survive. I was struggling every single day. But even on my worst nights, even when I barely had enough money to eat, I was still happier than I had ever been. Because for the first time, I was free. And that's when I met David. David was my best friend's dad. At first, he was just someone who looked out for me. He invited me over for dinner when he knew I was skipping meals. He gave me advice when I felt lost. He was warm, supportive, and kind. And over time, he became something more. The father I never had. He never forced himself into my life. It wasn't some dramatic moment where he suddenly adopted me. It was gradual. First, he called me kid. Then, he introduced me to his friends as a great young man. Then, one day, at a family gathering, he casually introduced me as his son. He didn't hesitate. He didn't add a disclaimer. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Like I wasn't just some burden. Like I was enough. But my parents? They didn't take it well. I didn't tell them. I didn't think they deserved to know. But somehow they found out. Maybe through a distant relative. Maybe through social media. Maybe they had just been watching. Either way, the second they did, the phone calls started. At first, I ignored them. My parents never called me unless they wanted something. Our interactions were just passive-aggressive texts or emails with fake emergencies. If they were suddenly blowing up my phone, I knew something was wrong. And sure enough, by the fourth call, I picked up. And the moment I answered, I regretted it. Silence. Then, a long, shaky breath. Their signature move when they were about to guilt trip me. Then came the question, the one I had been dreading. Is it true? I stayed silent. Did you really let some man replace us? They sounded heartbroken. Like I had just told them I was leading a double life as a criminal. Like they hadn't spent 27 years treating me like garbage. Then came the demand. I needed to apologize immediately. I needed to acknowledge that calling another man Dad was a betrayal. I needed to make it right. They called it unforgivable, disgusting, a disgrace. And I finally said what I had wanted to say my entire life. There is nothing to apologize for. Silence. Then, a sharp, offended inhale. The shock in their voice was almost funny. I kept going. David has been more of a father to me than you ever were. More silence. Then, they hung up. I didn't think much of it at first. I thought that was the end of it, but I should have known better. Because my parents? They weren't done. They were just getting started. I should have known my parents wouldn't just let it go. They weren't the type to accept defeat. They had spent their whole lives controlling me, making sure I knew my place, making sure I never thought I was good enough for more. And now? Now I had something they couldn't control. A real father figure. A real family. A life that didn't include them. And they couldn't stand it. So, of course, they sent my sister. I hadn't spoken to Emily in years. She had always been the perfect daughter. The one who could do no wrong. The one they treated like a queen while I was their personal servant. And now, she was calling me out of nowhere. Which meant one thing. She was sent to fix me. I let it go to voicemail. And when I finally played the message, it was exactly what I expected. Hey, it's Emily. I think we need to talk. I don't know what's going on with you, but Mom and Dad are really hurt. You're being incredibly selfish. You can't just replace your real family. And the best part? I get that you're still upset about stupid things from when we were kids, but it's time to grow up. I smiled, because that was all I needed to hear. I called her back. She picked up instantly, like she had been waiting. Finally, she sighed. I was starting to think you were ignoring me. I leaned back, smirking. I was. Silence. Then, she scoffed. Real mature. I let her sit in that for a moment before speaking. What do you want, Emily? She sighed, exasperated. Listen, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to stop this. You're acting insane. I raised an eyebrow. Am I? She huffed. Yes. You cut off Mom and Dad. You're acting like some stranger is more important than your own blood. I chuckled. That stranger has done more for me in the last 5 years than our parents ever did in my entire life. She tried to recover. Oh, come on. They weren't that bad. I laughed. That bitter, sharp laugh that only comes when someone is trying to gaslight you. Oh, really? Tell me, Emily, when was the last time Mom and Dad helped me with anything? When was the last time they even treated me like their son? She hesitated, but I wasn't done. When you wanted new clothes, you got them. When I needed something, I was being ungrateful. She tried to cut in. That's not. When you needed money for college, they paid everything. I had to work 2 jobs just to survive. More silence. And then, I said the words that finally shut her down. You weren't their daughter, Emily. She inhaled sharply. I lowered my voice. You were their favorite possession. She let out a nervous laugh. That's ridiculous. But she didn't sound so sure anymore. Because deep down, she knew. She had just never admitted it before. And now? Now she was forced to face it. She tried one last time. Look, they're willing to talk. If you just apologize, I'm sure. I smiled. No. She blinked. What? I leaned back, relaxed. I'm not apologizing. She snapped. You're being a brat. You're acting like they were horrible to you. I tilted my head. They were. She groaned. This is ridiculous. You're seriously choosing some random old man over your actual family? I grinned. Oh, Emily. I paused for effect. Then I said the words that broke her. I don't have a family. Silence. Then, she whispered, furious. You don't mean that. I shrugged. I do. She tried one last time. Her voice was quiet now, desperate. What if you regret it? I smiled. I won't. And then, I hung up, because I had finally won, and I wasn't going to waste another second looking back. But my parents weren't done yet, because if guilt didn't work, they were going to try something worse. Something ugly. Something that would make me realize. They weren't just toxic. They were dangerous. I thought Emily was the final attempt, that after I shut her down, my parents would finally accept defeat, that they would realize I wasn't coming back, that I was done being their doormat. But people like them, they don't just let go. They get desperate, and when guilt didn't work, they went for something worse. They went for revenge. It started small. My credit card was randomly declined. A few fraud alerts popped up on my accounts. My bank notified me that someone tried to access my information. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, a technical issue, a security mistake. But then, it got worse. One morning, I woke up to an email from my landlord. My lease had been terminated. The property manager claimed I requested to move out. They said my final payment had already been processed. I froze, because I never requested to move out. I called the office immediately, and when they forwarded me the email request from my account, I saw my mother's name at the bottom. She had forged my request. She had tried to make me homeless. I clenched my fists, my blood boiling. They weren't just trying to pull me back. They were trying to ruin me. I fixed it, of course. I proved the request was fraudulent. I locked down my financial accounts. I filed a police report. But the damage? It was done. Because now I knew. My parents weren't just manipulative. They were dangerous. That was when David stepped in. He had been watching everything, waiting for me to ask for help. But I hadn't. Because for so long, I had been alone. For so long, I had been taught that no one would come to save me. But David? He wasn't like them. And this time, he wasn't letting me fight alone. When I told him what happened, he nodded calmly. Then he said the words that changed everything. You know what you have to do, right? I swallowed hard. What? He sighed. You have to cut them off. For good. I hesitated, because part of me still felt guilty, still felt like I was overreacting. And David? He saw it. He put a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. They will never stop, kid. You think this is the worst they'll do? I stayed silent. Then he shook his head. You know what they're going to do next? I exhaled. What? He met my eyes. They're going to come for your future. And just like that, I knew he was right. Because if this failed, they would try something bigger, something permanent. And I couldn't let them. So I did what needed to be done. I changed my phone number. I froze my credit and filed identity theft claims. I got a restraining order. And then, I sent one final email. Not to Emily. Not to my mother. Not to my father. To everyone. I made it clear. I was done. I wanted no further contact. Any attempt to reach me again would result in legal action. I didn't say it angrily. I didn't say it out of spite. I just said it like a fact. Because that's what it was. A fact. They had no power over me anymore. For the first time in my life, I was free. No more guilt. No more obligations. No more fighting for love that was never real. I wasn't their servant. I wasn't their backup plan. I wasn't their son. And they were nothing to me. And the best part? They couldn't stand it. Because in the end, I won. And they were finally, truly alone. I thought I was done. I had cut them off. I had blocked their numbers. I had made it clear that I was never coming back. But toxic people, they don't just let go. They cling. And when they realized they had truly lost me, they made one last, pathetic attempt to drag me back. It started with a message from Emily. Not an email. Not a call. A handwritten letter delivered to my door. It wasn't apologetic. It wasn't remorseful. It was desperate. You've made your point. We get it. You're mad. But how long are you going to punish mom and dad for being human? They raised you. They fed you. They clothed you. They did their best. Family is forever, whether you like it or not. You have to forgive them. I let out a slow, amused breath. Because this was hilarious. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't holding a grudge. I was protecting myself. And if they had actually done their best, I wouldn't have spent my childhood feeling like a burden. I wouldn't have been forced to fight for scraps of love. I wouldn't have had to find a new father. But the fact that they thought I owed them for their neglect, that was proof that they never deserved me. I threw the letter in the trash without a second thought. But that was just their first move. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, and when I played it back, I heard his voice, my father, and what he said was the most pathetic thing I had ever heard. I don't know what you expect to get out of this. You think you're hurting me? You think you've won? I'll be fine without you. But you'll regret this. You'll come crawling back one day, and when you do, don't expect me to be here. Then he hung up, like it was supposed to be some final, devastating blow. like I was supposed to panic and run back to them, like I was supposed to care. I laughed, because this was the last trick they had. Guilt hadn't worked. Manipulation hadn't worked. Financial sabotage hadn't worked. So now they were trying to flip the script, to make it seem like I was the one who abandoned them, like I was the one who would suffer without them, like I would ever, in a million years, miss them. But I had never been happier. I blocked the number. I moved on with my life. Because the truth, they weren't punishing me by cutting me off. They were setting me free. And for the first time, I was finally, completely at peace. I didn't respond to my father's voicemail. I didn't call Emily back. I didn't send a final message, or a long speech, or even an angry rant about how wrong they were. Because I didn't need to. They wanted a reaction, and I gave them nothing. For weeks after that last voicemail, I waited for the next move. Another letter, another call, another attempt to force their way back into my life. But nothing came, and that's when I knew they had finally given up, because I had taken away the one thing they thrived on: control. My mother had always been the emotional manipulator. She played the victim, turning every situation into a way to make me feel guilty for not doing what she wanted. When I tried to leave home, she cried about how lonely she would be. When I pushed back against their favoritism, she told me I was too sensitive. When I cut them off, she told everyone I was heartless and ungrateful. But this time, there was no audience. There was no reaction. There was no me, falling into the same old cycle. So she had nothing left. My father, on the other hand, he wasn't the type to beg. He wasn't the type to apologize. His pride was too big. So when I didn't come crawling back, he did what he always did. He pretended he never cared. He told relatives I had always been difficult. He acted like I was some troubled kid who just needed time to come to my senses. He convinced himself that I would regret it one day. But he was wrong. Because the truth, I never felt freer. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't grieving my family. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I was done. And when I finally realized that, it was the best feeling in the world. One day, months later, I did something I never thought I would do. I took the last picture I had of my parents. Not out of nostalgia, not out of regret, not out of some desperate need for closure. I just looked at it, and for the first time, I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness, not loss, just nothing. And that's when I knew I had one. I built a life without them. I had people who truly cared about me. I finally felt free. And them? They had no power over me anymore. No control, no access, no influence. I had walked away forever, and I would never look back.